us over the lunch hour today. My name is Liz Kennedy. I'm the Audience Development Product Manager at the Gazette. It really, all that means is that I'm happy to host some of these events for subscribers and readers of the Gazette. So very happy to have our photo team with us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Jim Slosiarek, who's going to walk you through our webinar today. At the end, we'll have our Q&A, so be sure to drop your questions in the chat. And if we don't have time for your question, we'll be sure to follow up after the fact. So take it away, Jim.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. In my 21 years at the Gazette, I think now we are in a perfect opportunity to redefine what the visuals team is about. With our staff changeover, our recent hires, we have some great storytellers that have a passion for storytelling and meeting people and bringing you some good photos. So to take it away, we'll have Savannah Blake start us off.
Thanks, Jim. So hi, everyone. My name is Savannah. I am a photojournalist at the Gazette. I've been here since September of 2021, so I'm still pretty new. Just a little background about me, how I got into photojournalism and photography. I actually found an old film camera when I was in middle school at a garage sale, and just kind of started taking photos. My middle school happened to have a dark room, so I was able to do the kind of old-fashioned photography, and we've obviously moved towards digital. But that kind of led me to attend the University of Oregon, where I graduated in 2016 with a degree in photojournalism. And I had a lot of really great mentors that pushed me to accept internships around the country. So I've gotten the opportunity to work at a variety of different news stations, and that's kind of helped me develop my photography style. For me, being a photojournalist has always been my dream job, because I love being immersed in my community. I love meeting new people. And I think that's why I really connected with photography, because I used to be a really shy kid. So getting behind a lens and forcing myself to use a smaller lens, like a 24-70, really causes me to break out of my shell and to get to know the world around me. And for me, what I love most is being able to capture the emotions of a person or an event, to give a more behind the scenes look of the story. As a photographer, the ability to make a court hearing or a basketball game look fun or exhilarating through different angles is something that I also really love. Okay, so we'll jump in with some of my photos. So as a photographer, feature photos are a big part of what we do, and it's something I really enjoy because going back to that, connecting with the community. So in this photo, we didn't have a lot of assignments on the board, so that was an opportunity for me to get outside, drive around the downtown area, and I happened to see this little boy playing soccer with his grandfather. It was, an unseasonably warm day in December. And so just doing something like this was a cool little way to get out and see what was happening in our backyard. Another assignment that I got to do was the first public menorah lighting. So when I came into this assignment, there was a lot of young men dancing around to Yiddish music. And since it was low light, I really wanted to capture that movement. And I did so by doing a long exposure. And just, it was another interesting experience. I had never been to a menorah lighting before, so something that was really cool to see. Also being a photographer, we're tasked to find kind of little nuggets of joy in our assignments. So when I see an expression on a child's face, like seeing Santa walk up behind them or sledding down a hill with their dad, for the first snow day, or even just helping out some neighbors, shovel snow. that's an opportunity for me to share a story with the community, something that, you know, is happening on the everyday. And we get a lot of feedback from that, and that's something that people like to see. So this is a story that I worked on with our reporter, Aaron Jordan, about a barber apprenticeship program at the jail in Mount Pleasant. Trent Keller is the barber that drives down to Waterloo to Mount Pleasant once a month to teach some of the inmates about how to be a barber. And so I got to shadow Trent at his barber shop. And while I was doing so, just kind of noticed him trimming this man's beard and really liked the way everything kind of lined up. Just one of those fun little detail shots, and I opted to put it in black and white just to make the little colors in the background less distracting. So another one of my favorite things to shoot is sports, not only because of how fast moving sports are, you're never going to be bored, but also because they hold a lot of emotions, you know, for these athletes working hard throughout their season. Making it this far has a lot of meaning for them. So whether they're walking away being defeated, or they're walking away as winners, they're going to show that on the mat. It's fun to find different facial expressions when you're at a game or at a tournament, especially when it's something that, you know, some days I'll shoot basketball 5 days a week. So trying to find different shots and different faces is always a fun challenge. This is another example of kind of turning your attention away. This was at the Penn State, the Iowa game versus Penn State. As soon as I knew that Iowa had the win in the bag, I immediately turned around because these people behind me were giving me a lot of big reactions. So it really kind of highlighted the energy of the game at the end. The stadium was just alive, and kind of, this is one of the reasons that I have such a passion for sports photography, is because you get to experience moments like this. So something that I love to do is, you know, sports and daily assignments, but I've always had a passion for photo stories. These kind of stories allow me to spend multiple days, weeks, sometimes months with the subject to get a more intimate view of kind of who they are and get that behind the scenes look. So this story is from one I did about the Guardians of the Black Forest. They're a reenactor group that do historically accurate battle scenes from the medieval times. In this photo, Alec, who's on the left in the red, and then Sullivan on the right, are helping Chris, the founder, put on his chainmail. The chainmail itself can weigh about 65 pounds, and it's also a really frigid day, so it's really cold. This photo is just kind of giving you an insight about not only that process to put it on, but the effort that they put forth. All of the members that I talked to during that day, the longer I was there, really let their guard down. And we're really dedicated to the group and talked about how they have a family aspect that they've developed over the years. And so they get together, you know, in the cold and the heat, and they have a genuine passion for it, which is what I wanted to tell in this story. And this is something that I'm excited to continue on and follow them in the summertime when they do a live Ren Fair. And then this is a photo story I did on a large animal vet. She was out on a ranch in Mechanicsville working on 100 head of cattle. She examined each cow to see if they were pregnant, and if so, how far along they were. You know, what she does is really important for farmers out in eastern Iowa. They depend on her to make sure that their cattle are healthy and that they can have a successful springtime when their calves are born. So, you know, I wanted to kind of show not only what she was doing, which is, you know, a long labor-intensive day, but also the relationship that she has with the farmer and other kind of clients that she has. So this is just kind of some of the things that I have gotten to work on while I'm here. I know I haven't been here for a long period of time, but I'm looking forward to some of the projects that I have in the works and continuing to kind of get to know Eastern Iowa and the community I have around me.
Great, thanks, Savannah. Great photos. Next up is Geoff Stellfox. He joined the staff in the beginning of October of 2021. Take it away, Geoff.
Hey everybody, I'm Geoff. So as Jim mentioned, I joined the staff in October of last year, and I came from the Herald News in Joliet, Illinois. I'm originally from Crete, Illinois, which is kind of in the area. Yeah, I kind of took a winding path to get into photojournalism. I actually graduated with a degree in finance, and I worked in banking for 3 months before I realized that was not for me. And I kind of dropped everything, and I ended up moving to South America for a few years, bounced around there, got into video. I worked at a tourism company. I did their photo and video work on the side while I worked at a bed and breakfast. And I just kind of fell into photography, honestly. I moved back to the US, and I did a master's program. I thought I was gonna do some communication work, and I took one photojournalism class, and it's the only photo class I've had. And I kind of fell in love with it. So I dropped out of grad school and I went straight into freelancing. And, I started my career shooting $25 assignments. I've worked my way up. I got a staff job at the Herald News, which was a client who I freelanced for a few years. And it was exciting to get my first staff job. And then, the Gazette had an opening and they do great work. And I just kind of jumped at it, and, here I am. It's been a great experience. And I definitely took the winding road, but I really love what I do. I love the work we do. And, for me, photojournalism is about meeting people, like Savannah said. That's kind of what gets me up in the morning. That's what drives me. I work on a lot of long-term projects. I'm always out finding projects. And I used to tell people that, I was never in love with photography. I was in love with like people. And, the more I got into it, the more I realized that I needed to elevate my photography. I needed to elevate, I don't like to call it art because that sounds really pretentious, but, I really want to do justice to the people who trust me to tell their stories. And, they let me in their life. They let me spend, days, weeks, months with them. And that's a responsibility that I really take to heart. And it's really, I think about that a lot. And I feel like I owe these subjects a lot. So the least I can do is, create the best work possible and always strive to grow. I had a whole speech kind of planned, but, I thought a lot about my work this year and like what it means and why I do what I do. And I realized that, at the end of the day, like my job is to like click a button. Like what I do is I highlight people. And that's something like, I know there's a lot of students here, like never lose track of that. Like your job, like this job is about people. And that's why we do what we do. Anybody can learn how to operate a camera. You need to be able to find these people and make sure, you really, you take that responsibility seriously. And, so I want to take this opportunity with my work to kind of just highlight some really amazing people that I've met during my time at the Gazette. It's been a short time, but I've been out as much as I can trying to meet people and, grow as a photographer, but really, be out in the community and highlight as many people as I can, because I know how important it is to see someone who looks like you in the newspaper, especially in an area like Eastern Iowa that, is kind of demographically similar. Like it's important to find the people who don't see themselves in the newspaper and make sure they do, And so with that, I will dive right into some of my work. All right, so this first photo was actually my first ever assignment at the Gazette. And I just kind of jumped right in. And these are the kinds of stories that I love, sports feature stories. I've been in athletics my whole life. I still compete. And to have this as my first assignment was kind of a dream. And, I met Hannah Longmire, and she's in middle school. She's a congenital amputee, and she's a captain of her cross country team. And, she's just this really inspirational, like badass little girl. And she doesn't let anything define her. She's a great runner, and that's it, So I look for ways to, creatively, show who she is, the relationship she has with her team. And, as a first assignment, that kind of trust for me was just awesome. So next is a story that I worked on with one of our reporters, Elijah Decius, and it's about Roxy Mess. And Roxy Mess is a drag queen in the area. And for, a town that has one gay bar and, almost lost its only gay bar, these kinds of stories for me were important to highlight, just to kind of, show who's in the community, show what it's like, and just to kind of give a little slice of life about, what the day-to-day is. This isn't their full-time job, this isn't her full-time job. And to kind of show what she goes through on the weekends to put on these shows, for me, was just a fun experience. And now, come wrestling season, for me, I've always been involved in combat sports. I love combat sports. And, women's wrestling was a project that I decided to kind of undertake when I got here. And, the growth of the sport, Iowa is wrestling. And, women's wrestling at the time hadn't been sanctioned. And for me, I really wanted to make a point to go out there and highlight girls who are kind of the pioneers of women's wrestling in Iowa. So, I came across City High and I met Nabi Emanuel. And so she was born in Tanzania. She spent time in a refugee camp, and this is her first year wrestling. And she just picked it up like a fish to water. And, she wasn't born in this country. She's not from Iowa, yet she embodies the idea of like what Iowa wrestling is, nonstop hard work, pushing forward. And, she's this short little girl, but she's nonstop, and she's just got this quiet determination. And, she's not someone who asks for attention. And those are the kinds of people that you want to highlight whenever you have the opportunity. And so another girl, Jasmine Anderson, she's 9 years old. I think her birthday was yesterday, actually. So she's now 10, but she's trying to qualify for boys state. And, I got to spend some time with her at her meets. And it's the same thing, she's out there kicking the boys' asses, and she's, working hard, making a name for herself. And a lot of times, she's the only girl at these meets, or one of the only girls at these meets. And she's the only Black girl at these meets. And for her to be able to kind of be a trailblazer in that way, it's, like I said, it's important to see yourself in these stories. And, maybe more people knowing about her can inspire them to get into girls wrestling, So for the bulk of the season, I actually spent time in Anamosa, and, I met this group of girls, this team. And, this is kind of one of my favorite stories of my career now. And these girls, the team was started by 3 wrestlers who had no previous experience 3 years ago. And now fast forward to this year, and they ended up being kind of the captains of the team. And not only do they help coach, but they lift up the girls, they teach them how to braid their hair for wrestling. They show them show them what it means to eat healthy, how to train. And, they're leaders for this team. And so this team is really self-driven. And for me, that was kind of like a microcosm for girls wrestling in Iowa. There was not sanctioning coming from the top. So it's from the bottom up. And, it's a group of motivated coaches, it's a group of motivated girls who made this happen. And, to kind of find a team that so readily like embodies that idea, for me was, an experience. Honestly, I just feel lucky that, they trusted me to hang out with them for this long, the coaches, the girls. It's fun to see them in state, through like the ups and downs and the highs and lows of the season. And, to get that trust to let me in during like the sensitive, challenging times, and also, the highs, was for me, I can't begin to kind of express my gratitude for the trust that they showed. And this kind of brings me to my last project, which is still ongoing. And during state wrestling for girls, I kind of decided at the last minute that I wanted to take a portrait of at least one girl from every school who participated. This was the year that they were supposed to be sanctioned. So I wanted to kind of find a way to highlight the trailblazers. And, like I said, one girl from every school, at least one girl from every school. And, that was on top of me shooting sports action, getting the competition photos, getting the finals matches. So, doing both at the same time, like, found a way to make it work. And while I didn't get all, I believe it's 158 schools, I did manage to photograph 128. So I'm 30 short. And I'm still planning to go out there and shoot the remaining schools, because for me, this project's about inclusiveness. The state tournament sanctioning happened because of these individuals. And to leave any school out, for me, kind of misses the point of my work and this project. Even if it's not our coverage area, this doesn't happen without them. So as like kind of a little bit of gratitude to show what these trailblazers have done, just to kind of capture who they are so future generations can see, who these girls were that made sanctioning happen. So, and that's it for me. Like I said, for student photographers out there, just, don't lose track of that this is about the people. Like anybody can operate a camera, but it takes a person to go out and understand people's stories and understand narrative and just get in the community and meet people. So
Thanks, Geoff. Great photos. Next up, Nick Rohlman. He's just about to celebrate his 1 month anniversary with the Gazette. So Nick, take it away. Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I started at the Gazette kind of in the beginning of this year or end of January. Before that, I had moved to Iowa City in November of 2015. I was working for a while at University Camera, doing a lot of like film developing and stuff in Iowa City when that was still there, and started freelancing for the Gazette, some other local publications. And then, yeah, worked my way from a freelancer into now a full staff role starting this year. So a lot of what I kind of started drawing me into photography was kind of documenting community events and the community kind of coming together and kind of this, and yeah, kind of showing like a lot of these big events and kind of community gatherings type of things. And so this is from the Pride Festival last fall. It's delayed because of COVID. It's Queen Alexandra St. James kind of welcoming guests or participants in a march for equality to the festival downtown. And another event I covered was covered a lot of sports, big events. This was the Fox Big Noon kickoff at the Penn State game this year. And of course, being here for a little while, I've covered the caucus. That's one of the things that really, really drew me into photojournalism, was kind of getting to be a part of a witness to that process and kind of to document history in a lot of ways. And just, yeah, kind of whether you're photographing a former vice president or a county supervisor on election night, I think that's really important to kind of not just tell the story, but to have those photos kind of for kind of a historical record visually of the community you work in. And then, of course, it's not, photojournalism isn't just about events, it's about some of the people in your community that are really important. So this is a photo of Willie Ray Fairley, who owns a barbecue restaurant in Cedar Rapids and kind of rose to kind of some notability when after the derecho, he just kind of threw open his doors and started feeding people. And that grew into a passion for him, I think, and really helping those in need. And now whenever there's kind of a big natural disaster, he'll shut down his restaurant and go wherever he's needed and help feed people. So this is him kind of loading up to head down to the Gulf after a hurricane a year ago. Like I said, going out it's not just about events, going out in the community. This is for a story on kind of home health aides and home health care workers, and kind of spending time, and rather than at these big events and kind of quieter moments, people as they're kind of navigating kind of very important issues really to do with healthcare in the time of COVID and vaccinations. One of the things that I really, really like, while I was freelancing, I worked as an assistant, notably for Danny Wilcox Frazier of 7 Photo, but for a variety of other photo and video shoots as well. And my job in a lot of that was to do lighting or sound. So I've always been drawn to kind of very technical lighting and portraiture. And I think it's a good example of that. This is from a series of stories that our writer Aaron Jordan, who Savannah mentioned, is working on Black farmers. in the state of Iowa and kind of the challenges that they face specifically. And so I've always really looked for kind of to use light to kind of highlight individuals and kind of add an effect and tell the story beyond just taking a picture. This is another kind of a different use of it rather than highlighting a subject. Using light in this case, it's a story about a haunted house to kind of show the effect of this actor in the haunted house looking like they're actually floating. It's kind of a fun way to use light, kind of achieve an effect like that. But I don't just look for that light in kind of portrait settings. Like to use that in sports to kind of highlight actions. Here using off-camera flash at one of the youth races during Jingle Cross. I really enjoy covering cycling. It's pretty dynamic and there's a pretty vibrant community around cycling in the state of Iowa. There's another photo from a couple weeks ago during a fat tire bike race at Lake McBride, which is kind of a cool event because normally bikes are not allowed on those trails at all. So it's kind of a unique, once a year, people get to go out and ride. And I guess people seem to enjoy riding their bikes when it's 5 degrees above zero. But another example of kind of using light to highlight sports action. I really like this photo because it's kind of a unique opportunity to find light like this. A lot of sort of high school gyms from a volleyball tournament, a lot of gyms don't have windows, and when they do, games are at night. So very rarely do you get kind of that light that really creates that dramatic kind of noir look. But it's always something I'm looking for in my sports photography, especially, is kind of that using light in addition to kind of fast shutter speed, shallow depth of field to really isolate subjects and kind of freeze action, kind of show something that maybe you wouldn't see if you were just watching the game on TV, kind of capture some of those moments. And then, yeah, just really using light to kind of highlight the drama, like kind of the motion frozen in time. And then of course, there's always big moments with sports as well, and kind of the emotion of some of those triumphs and milestones. This is Iowa women's basketball head coach is Lisa Bluter, kind of reacting during a presentation for her 800th win, career win, which is a huge milestone. So it's very special to be able to kind of, like I said, to kind of go back to documenting history, to be there in moments like those, kind of record them for the community. I think that's it.
Great, Nick. Thanks. So for me, I'm Jim Slosiarek. I've been with the Gazette for 21 years, and my mentors and the people I looked up to, the photographers I looked up to, were more good daily photographers and wire photographers, wire shooters. So, I just loved their ability to kind of be tossed in a situation and come back with a picture that is storytelling, from any situation. So this particular photo, we're getting an influx of Afghan refugees into the Cedar Rapids area. And this was some arrivals at the Eastern Iowa airport. I just like the moment between the man on the left, Aftab, and his just the hospitality that he showed to the refugees coming in. The gentleman on the right. He just, Aftab would not take no for an answer. He was going to carry this man's, basically his worldly possessions. This is all he has in the world, in the world. This is what he arrived at. So I like capturing those kind of those moments of humanity and, you know, that connection. Sports photography, working at the Gazette, we get a very steady stream of sports assignments. This was down at the Extreme Arena in Coralville for one of the wrestling tournaments. As Savannah mentioned, it's all about, for me, it's all about emotion and the celebration and even the dejection. But here, luckily, we got some celebrating coaches. And it's not just the athletes. You know, you look around, you keep your eyes open, and anybody can make a good picture. I was in Marion and noticed this woman watering the plants. And we have a steady need for just kind of slice of life, feature-y type photographs. Also, somebody had a question about what kind of cameras and gear that we use. I took this picture with a 14 millimeter. So it's an ultra wide angle lens, which has a wide field of view. So you are able to include a lot more of the surrounding area. This was a picture that was included upon request. So I just like being able to take good photographs, and actually, you know, the Gazette is a great platform to showcase my personal vision. You know, the pictures that I love to take, I get to share with our readers. So that's very rewarding to me. Stepping away from the action, a lot of sports photography, you know, you usually use, you know, big, giant white lenses. This particular photo was taken with a wide angle. I think it was actually maybe a 24 millimeter. Just nice sunlight, late afternoon, early evening. This picture was taken not too far away from my house. It's I kind of have a habit of traveling the gravel, you know, around our coverage area, just to kind of see what I can see, and, you know, come back with something. Trevante Davis, getting a haircut from Cut Kings. It's a mobile barbershop that is based out of Waterloo, Iowa. So this is before the school year last fall. In the time of COVID, photography is all about expressions and about, you know, people's reactions and actions and everything. So in the time of COVID, everybody's wearing masks. So the expressions and the reactions, they're all very, very subtle. I just like the eyes on Hannah Kirby, kind of says it all to me. You know, she's getting her state issued ID so the family could go on a vacation. So, and just a little twinkle in her eye. Yeah, she looks at her father, kind of makes a moment for me. I like getting the backstories behind photographs that I take as well. So this is Crystal Castle, the woman with the cell phone. And, race car driver Tony Olson is the driver on the right. And she's actually reacting to a baby gender announcement at Hawkeye Downs. And this backstory behind the picture is that the deal was that if Tony started from dead last and won the feature race, he was allowed to make the gender reveal. So this is just a reaction from that. Again, just getting out, driving around, seeing what I can see. You know, our jobs as photographers, photojournalists, is to make the ordinary look extraordinary. You know, just showing people something that they don't normally get to see on a daily basis. As Savannah mentioned, you know, sports is all about the emotion, you know, especially at the high school level. You know, the athletes are playing for, you know, school pride. You know, they're competing for their teammates. So just to capture that in a photograph, to kind of tell that story. Again, you know, I find it rewarding to be able to kind of have a challenge of coming back with a photograph that kind of elevates what the original assignment was. This particular assignment was just to go out and photograph Terry Pasker's gravestone. So I could have been in and out of there in 5 minutes. But I took the time to set up a couple of electronic flashes and just really try and light the scene and elevate the photo. You don't have to go too far away from making good pictures too. This is actually the maple tree in my backyard. It's actually my daughter's maple tree because she kind of grew up with it. So, you know, it had her swing, and so I think she and her friends kind of carved their names into the tree. So it's kind of nice finding pictures right in your backyard, literally. Again, just adventures at the county fair, getting out and just being curious and roaming the barns and just seeing what you can see. Good sports photography is good sports photography, whether it's high school, PUE, Iowa football, you know, whatever. So you can make good pictures and find good light anywhere. When you get the Marion mayor on a piece of exercise equipment, you definitely take a picture. So just kind of getting back to, you know, finding unique moments out of ordinary situations is rewarding to me. It's just that challenge that keeps me going. After this is up at the state softball tournament in Fort Dodge. So after a long week of covering multiple games a day, often simultaneous games, it's just nice to kind of slow down and, you know, just wait for the reactions. portraiture, love portraits, using multiple lights. I actually placed a light behind behind that wall, and the light actually lit up those two, the green leaves and the slits in the metal. So I thought it contributed, made an interesting background. This is also just another frame from state volleyball. Little bit wider frame. Sometimes it's nice to step back. There's just a lot of visual elements to the picture that kind of contribute to telling the story. The fan in the red, kind of right in the center, the students in the background, the coaches coming off the benches, everything contributes. So we're back to it.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim. Thanks to everyone. I was just smiling ear to ear while you guys were going through all of your photos. So let's turn it over to our Q&A. We had one emailed in, and this was regarding rules for photos. What rules do you have for photos you do or do not take or publish? For instance, some papers don't use photos with more than 5 individuals. Some papers decline to use grip and grin photos. What are your guidelines for obtaining permission to shoot and publish photos of adults or children?
Well, we definitely try to avoid grip and grins, for sure. Same thing kind of goes with groundbreakings. We get assigned quite a few groundbreakings. My rule is photograph the groundbreaking, but don't come back with a shovel photo. Find me something beyond that. You use your talent, use your vision to bring me back something different. As far as when to take a picture, when not to take a picture, it's for me at least, it's a feeling that I get from subjects. It's you kind of have that intuition after a while, and maybe there's just a little bit of a nonverbal communication between the subjects where they kind of let on that it would be okay to take their picture and stuff like that. So I don't know, what does everybody else feel about that?
I mean, when it comes to photographing kids in particular, I try to find the parents to make sure that they feel comfortable and they know who I am as well. I also have to let the parents know that I can't, run the photo of their child without getting their name and their age. That goes against our journalism ethics. I can't just put a minor that's under 18, in a photo, but that goes for, anyone. Especially if it's, less than 4 people or something like that, we have to make sure that we're identifying those people. So for me, it's about kind of creating that trust. So maybe just having a quick conversation, introducing myself, what I do, letting them know I'm a photographer at the Gazette. If they're also wary, I also love to show them examples of my work. Usually can just kind of pull up my Instagram really quick, and that can often kind of quell a lot of hesitations that they have personally.
Yeah,
I don't ask. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
I think that sometimes people might be skeptical of you out taking pictures, but in nearly every instance, if you say, give them your name, tell them I'm a photojournalist with the Cedar Rapids Gazette, we're out here doing a story on X, Y, or Z, a lot of people who might have been hesitant will all of a sudden want to talk to you and be like, and not always, sometimes that's not the case, but generally I think as long as you're straightforward and identify yourself, people are usually pretty excited to see you out in the community making pictures.
Yeah, I never ask like minors for their names. I always ask like, hey, are your parents around? And then they take me to the parents and I ask them. And that's kind of the way to go. Like I never want to break trust. Um, obviously if there's some sort of like someone's being brought into a courthouse, there's some kind of breaking news, like obviously it's a different story. But for the most part, like I'm not so attached to photos that, it's worth breaking someone's trust to me. So that dialogue, and talking to parents, I'll never push them to say yes. It's a yes or no. It's an easy thing. If they are that uncomfortable, then, if I was to go ahead and publish it anyways, that just breaks a level of trust that I don't want to do. So.
Okay, so we have quite a few questions in our Q&A, and we've had some in chat that have kind of been answered as we go. Looks like some requests for shutter in place to maybe come back. And then lighting comments, enjoyed it a lot. Are lower light type photos used much in print newspaper? That was one question from Betty.
I think they are sometimes. I mean, it is sometimes that stuff is difficult to get into a print newspaper. We do have an online presence where that stuff will often get used. And I guess that's talking about like kind of the dramatic shadows and stuff like that. I think it gets used pretty often. Maybe they're using a little more of the black ink on the plates on days where I have photos like that in the paper, but haven't had any. It is something you have to be mindful of, though, is making sure you do have options that will work in not just on the front page, on inside pages or in maybe smaller print uses, because that real estate is limited. So it's something to keep in mind, but it doesn't kind of, for me at least, I'm not going to not take that photo because it might not work in print.
For me too, it's just trying to get creative with the light when there is low light situations, kind of like that menorah photo that I did, because normally for a situation where you have someone moving around, you have to have a higher shutter speed, which requires more light. So a way that I was able to capture them moving was by setting my shutter speed a lot lower, that allowed me to get those kind of streak effects, and kind of show that they were moving without sacrificing the image quality and making it look really grainy or looking really dark. But during the actual ceremony, I had to kind of rely off what little light there was left and like the flames that they were using. So stuff like that, we also have to kind of get creative with when it's a situation where it is going into print, especially in the winter time and it's an outdoor event.
Okay, another question. Does the Gazette provide your camera equipment?
Yes, they do. Thankfully. So I think all of us have personal equipment as well. So, and some of us, we can usually augment, our jobs, with personal equipment. So just to kind of make our lives easier sometimes. So.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate. The Gazette provides a it's not the newest and nicest, but it can do the job, and we're very fortunate to have the equipment that is provided to us.
Okay, and Jim comments that grip and grin is a photo, usually of two people looking at the camera, shaking hands or passing a giant check. Okay, I was curious about that too. Okay, another question. Are there too many limits and restrictions to allow more photos from entertainment venues, such as the light, energy, angler, etc., to be featured? That is kind of like insider view.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more restrictions that have been placed on us lately. It used to be you could go to a concert and actually get right up below the stage. You'd still be limited to, maybe, the first 3 songs or something like that. Now it's basically you're back at the back of the arena by the soundboard, and you might get 1 song and that's it. So plus, deadline, our early deadlines kind of don't allow us to get anything live, from a concert in the paper. So
Okay, another question. What's your superpower? Maybe each of you could go through this. Terry asked that question. So maybe just like, what's your photojournalist superpower?
I don't know. I guess mine would be Mr. Bland. I could say, just kind of blend into the surroundings more. The gray man. Yeah, I like that. The gray man.
I guess I would just say getting those emotions, but that's because I like to talk with my subjects. I typically try to be a funny, goofy person. So if I can crack a joke with one of my subjects, kind of lighten the mood, that always helps too. So I just have that gift for gab when I need it, and that can often benefit me.
I'd say I'm torn between I'm a pro at taking rejection and using it to like keep me going, and also I just listen to critiques well. That's probably my biggest superpower, I guess. That sounds negative, but it's good in photography. So
guess I'll go with I just somehow always seem to, through serendipity, meet someone who's perfect for a story. Just kind of just talking to people, and yeah, just seem to find just sometimes you'll be working on a story and talk to someone at a gas station or in a restaurant, and then all of a sudden find something that just really fits in with the story very well. Other than that, I would say getting to do this job at all is pretty special. Maybe not a superpower, but it's a special opportunity.
Well, that's very inspiring for our students that are on this call today. We had another question. Do you find that your professional photojournalism improves, augments your personal hobby photography, or does it distract from it or make you less motivated to go out and do personal work?
most of my personal work is photojournalism related, so I publish a lot of it. And honestly, like it's important for me to have non-photography hobbies because you'll get burned out. Honestly, this is like, in a way, this is an easy job, but in another way, it's not an easy job. And sometimes you need like a palette cleanser, because when I'm burned out, I don't take good photos. And so it's important for me to not always be thinking about photos. During my hours at work, during my shifts, if I'm not shooting, I'm definitely doing research, and I'm definitely like working on whatever skill I'm trying to improve. But I really think that, especially in journalism, work-life balance is a big thing. So non-photo hobbies are good for me to just keep going. Me and Jim, we worked at least 2 14-hour days for state wrestling, plus another like a 12 and a 10. And that's a lot of photography, man. And it's good to be able to step back and do something else and like reset, because you just kind of eventually go on autopilot mode, and you gotta be able to switch off and get those creative juices flowing. So whether that's doing art, like I do Thai boxing, whatever it is to kind of change it up is really, for me, important. But I know other people are different.
I mean, I guess like my love for photojournalism came from my hobby photography. I started out as shooting a lot of like nature stuff. So for me, that I kind of distinguish that, like, because I love going on hiking and I love going camping, but it's just ingrained in me, and I guess it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing is I'm always looking for those photo opportunities. So if I see something beautiful, my knee-jerk reaction is to pull my camera out. But I distinguish that outside of my work, so that's something I do as a hobby and for fun. But I think they kind of intertwine and work together. So I'm able to have different creative outlets.
Yeah, I think, like Geoff said, I don't really photograph as much for myself anymore because it's important to not always be working. But I would say that I do almost always, I'm not as big as our work cameras, but a small camera that I always carry with me, just to kind of stay in practice for always be looking for photos. And yeah, definitely have gotten better at my own photography because of the opportunity to do it as a career as well.
Thank you for that. Did it take a while to feel comfortable being the photographer walking into the front of a meeting or an event to get a photo is a question?
I get, a camera just kind of opens doors and it allows you to, I call it kind of go beyond the velvet rope, to kind of go where normal people don't necessarily get to go. And, your responsibility in doing that is to, share what you see and what you photograph with a wider audience. So that's kind of my motivation for going up at, in front of a large meeting or a gathering or something like that. So I think initially, yeah, I kind of probably felt self-conscious, but then it's like, hey, I got a job to do, and to deliver the best pictures that I know how to do, and you just got to do it.
I don't know if meetings were like public meetings or events were always somewhere was not it's makes sense for a photographer to be there, I guess. I was never felt kind of that anxiety with meetings or events. It's more, I guess, with individuals, with kind of asking people to put their trust in you. That's still something that makes me a little anxious. But yeah, eventually you learn how to take no for an answer and you get used to it. But I always found it much harder to transition from, especially from when I was freelancing, all that event coverage into more in-depth stories where you are asking to spend more time with the individuals you're photographing, and rather than at an event or out in public in their homes or in their day-to-day life. I've always found that took me a lot longer to get comfortable with, I guess.
Well, we're about at time. Did you guys want to answer one more question?
Sure.
We had a question from Julia. Do you ever use the phone on your camera, and what do you think of the quality of those photos?
The best camera is the one you got with you. And if it's an iPhone or an Android, that's what you got. That's what you use. A number of years ago, I photographed our annual athletes of the year candidates with an iPhone. And, just because the whole Instagram and, filters and stuff like that were kind of a big thing, starting to become a big thing. That I thought it was just kind of timely and just use the phone for the portraits. Anybody else?
I had a short stint in broadcast, and we filmed something that aired on Chicago News on an iPhone. So, with iPhone B-roll, all the B-roll was iPhone. So yeah, I mean, I've done it before, not for the Gazette, but if you're creative, you can make most things look pretty nice. So.
All right, well, that about wraps up our time here. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank our photographers, Jim Slosiarek, Savannah Blake, Geoff Stellfox, and Nick Rohlman. We will be publishing this on our website as soon as it's ready to go. So thank you so much for joining us. And if we missed your question, I'll try to have the team follow up. And if you want to catch more photos from the photojournalism team, be sure to check out thegazette.com/photo-videos. So thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Students, please reach out if you guys have questions too. I'm sure all of us will be happy to email you back or call or whatever you guys want to do. So we're always happy to support that.